land and usage, because not all land is the same.
Right.
Not all land can be used the same. Some land can have income from a rental perspective, CRP that can come off of it. So what's some of the topics that you talk to people, buyers or sellers, about on that part?
So one thing that I think is very important that people don't necessarily realize is if you're looking for an acreage, let's say it's you find one that has 20 acres and they rent out 10 of the acres to somebody that farms it, but then they just have 10 as, like long grass or wildflowers or something. One of the things that you look at with those 10 acres that they're farming is called a CSR rating, which is a corn suitability rating. It goes from 0 to 100. 100 is obviously the best. The higher it is, the better kind of farm ground it is, the better kind of yields you will get. So depending on what you want to do with those acres or what your intentions are for it, that's something to look at. Or, if you're looking at purchasing larger amounts of land, that's definitely something then that you should really take into consideration is what the CSR rating is. A lot of the times it's considered in with the listing already, but you can go to the ISU extension website and it guides you right through how you can figure out what your CSR rating is for your land. It has a map and you just click right on the part that you're looking at. It tells you your soil levels, and it basically just gives you the calculation out for what your CSR rating is in that particular spot, which is super helpful too. So then you have an idea, because you don't want to spend all this money on acreages and then you've got terrible CSR ratings that aren't going to give you good yields with your farming. So that's definitely a big factor.
Yeah, the CSR ratings can affect how much they would potentially get. So what are some income potentials that somebody would have for land? Like if they have some land that they bought or they're looking at buying, what are some things that they can put some value on as far as the land?
So like I said, you can divide it out so that you can farm portions of the acres that you have. Another thing that you can do is called CRP land. It's land that doesn't necessarily have the best soil, or it's very eroded. It's better used for either like tall grass so that wildlife can live in it, or have nature preserve, or just growing trees. That in turn helps the soil for the farms that are around it. It's a nice program. You put the land in it for 10 to 15 years, but it is like a rental. You do get paid for doing it, but you do have to keep it in that program then for that time frame. You can't just decide 2 years you want to put it in to get paid and 2 years you want to take it out. So it is really nice. It's nice to use. They really promote it because of the wildlife aspect and just trying to keep animals around and living well. So
yep. And if someone has some tillable ground, there are options other than them farming it, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you can easily find somebody to rent land, even if it's 10 to 15 acres. There are a lot of acreages that get listed that say, we have 15 acres, but we only use 5, and the other 10 are currently rented for the next 10 years. So you might even get into a situation where you have land that's already producing income for you.
Yeah, and that's excuse me, that's something that sometimes buyers don't think about, is that they could get a monthly or yearly, depending on how the contract is written out. They could get some income off of that land. It's not something that just sits there. Then that could obviously help with the affordability for the land.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to rent out, and if it's good farmland, to rent it out, you're looking at getting $200 to $300 an acre. So it could be decently profitable.
Yeah, and getting that land. Anything else that someone should know on the land and usage perspective of it?
Another aspect too is if you have livestock or if you plan to have horses, definitely just looking at the terrain and seeing, like if you have a water source, if there's a creek nearby that you can access so that you don't have to necessarily try to figure out how you're going to haul water out to them. Checking out if there's fencing, seeing what the fencing is like. If you have to put up a lot of fencing, that's a decent amount of work and a decent expense, depending on what kind of animals you have. Another thing that you have to consider too is if you're like 3 miles down a gravel road, the maintenance that will occur in the wintertime, they don't tend to get to you very quickly. So you have to just factor in like the conditions of weather and what kind of driveway and lane you might have for an acreage. There are also some places where they have land use restrictions where you might not be able to build like a ATV track in your yard because they don't want that kind of a noise if you're near like some kind of like a country development. So just a lot of different little factors that you have to look into.
Excuse me. Yeah. And something for some people to realize too, when they, because there's a couple that I remember talking to, wasn't working with them as a client, but they had bought some land in Johnson County, and the size of it and the land usage of it, they couldn't actually build a house on it. And so they didn't realize that when they had purchased it. So, when you're looking at, from a buyer's perspective, when you're looking at these acreages, like you said, understanding, are there any restrictions in place with this land that could affect me using it how I intend to use it?
Sure.
Because the last thing you want to do is, or one of the last things you want to do is invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars or more into a property that you can't use it the way that you want to use it and that you intend to use it.
Right. Well, and then trying to resell it, if there's restrictions on it, that you might struggle with that too then. So.
Yeah, because then now you know about it, and if you don't disclose it, then there's potential issues there. And so then the property might be worth a little bit less.
Definitely. Yep.
Is there things that sellers should think about on this land usage that they should be researching restrictions or looking at income potential that maybe they haven't used it, but they could look into that would make it more sellable or more marketable, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like I currently have one acreage for sale outside of Vinton, and he put down, he leveled out the ground and put down the rock so that it's all ready for somebody to build an outbuilding on, which is usually something too that's very attractive to people, is just having an outbuilding, because you typically have to have a big lawnmower or tractor, or you're putting all sorts of bigger equipment into it. You can't just have like a 2-stall garage typically in the country. So, little things like that you can even factor into it. Yeah.
Anything else that you want to cover before we wrap up, or that you've thought about that we could touch on?
There are just so many factors when you are looking at land or acreages that it's definitely beneficial for you to reach out to a realtor just so that you know what you're getting into. You just, like we've talked about, there are just so many use restrictions or ways that you can use the land. So just making sure that you're buying something that's to your best benefit.
Yeah. And definitely for the buyers, understanding all those different things. And then, and then also from the seller's perspective, or somebody thinking about selling, know that there is a lot of potential buyers out there, but just because you have an acreage doesn't mean that it's going to be sellable or you're going to be able to get top dollar for it. There's going to be a lot of these type of factors that can go into that.
Yeah,
so
definitely.